It started in the middle of a crowd, the sound of hundreds of people talking, laughing, breathing. And then, suddenly, one voice that didn't belong. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it echoed inside his head, cold and clear, like a whisper slicing through the noise. I could kill them. I could do it right now. Riku froze. He turned toward the direction of the voice, eyes darting across strangers' faces, but no one seemed out of place. No one looked violent. No one even noticed him. The voice came again, this time louder, trembling with excitement, almost hungry. They wouldn't even see it coming. His heart pounded, his breath stuttered, and he knew that this wasn't the first time he'd heard it. It was just the first time he realized what it meant, because every time that voice appeared, someone nearby would die soon after. He didn't know whose thought it was, only that it always ended the same way, in blood. And so he ran, heart racing, trying to escape a sound that came from inside his own mind. His name was Riku Tanabe, 22 years old, an ordinary man with an extraordinary curse. He looked normal, quiet, polite, the kind of person you wouldn't remember after passing on the street, but inside his mind was a noise he could never silence. Ever since he was 17, Riku had heard the thoughts of others, but not just any thoughts, only the ones that carried the intent to kill. At first, he thought he was going crazy, hearing fragments of violent fantasies from strangers passing by, flashes of rage that faded as quickly as they came. But then, the voices started predicting death. Every time he heard them, someone in the city would be gone within a day. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was coincidence, imagination, paranoia, but the more he ignored it, the louder it became. The whispers followed him through train stations, empty classrooms, and narrow alleyways, always starting the same way. I could kill them. He couldn't tell who they came from. The businessman standing too close, the woman clutching her bag, the teenager staring blankly at the floor. It could be anyone. And that uncertainty became its own kind of terror, because how do you live in a world where any mind you pass might be thinking about murder? For years, Riku kept his secret, afraid that no one would believe him. And maybe, deep down, afraid that one day the voice he heard might be his own. Riku learned to live in silence, not because the world was quiet, but because the noise inside his head never stopped. Every crowded place became a minefield of voices waiting to detonate. Sometimes the whispers came like soft sighs, almost tender. She deserves it. It's justice. And sometimes they came like screams, raw and trembling with rage. He began avoiding people, skipping trains, quitting jobs, walking at night just to hear nothing but his own footsteps. But even then, the silence betrayed him. Once, in a nearly empty subway car, he heard it again. A voice, low and calm, counting down between breaths. 3, 2, 1. When Riku looked up, a man in a gray suit was gripping something inside his coat. By the time the knife flashed, Riku was already on his feet, running before anyone screamed. He didn't stay to see the blood. He didn't need to, because he knew exactly what came next. Sirens, chaos, the headline the next morning that would prove him right again. And yet, being right didn't make him feel safe. It made him feel responsible. If he could hear their thoughts before they killed, did that make him a witness, or an accomplice who chose not to stop them? The guilt gnawed at him like static in his skull. Every whisper he ignored became another name on the news, another ghost in his memory. He started keeping count, writing dates and places on a tattered notebook. 27 times he had heard the voice before someone died. 27 times he had done nothing. And each page of that notebook felt heavier than his own heartbeat. He told himself he couldn't stop them. He wasn't strong enough, wasn't sure enough, wasn't human enough anymore. Because after a while, even fear starts to sound like acceptance. It happened one rainy night, the kind of night where everything felt too quiet to be real. Riku was walking home through a narrow alley, umbrella in hand, when he heard it. The whisper, faint but trembling. If I just push her, it'll stop hurting." The voice wasn't cold like the others. It was scared, fragile, like a plea instead of a threat. Riku froze, scanning the alley until his eyes met those of a small boy standing beside a woman, his mother. The boy's hands were clenched, tears streaking his face, and in that instant, Riku knew the voice belonged to him. He didn't think, he just moved. In one desperate motion, he grabbed the child by the shoulders and pulled him back. The mother screamed, the boy sobbed. The world became a blur of sound and rain. When it was over, the woman thanked him, trembling, thinking he had saved them from some unseen danger. But Riku couldn't answer her, because as he looked into the boy's eyes, he saw something too familiar. Confusion, guilt, and fear that didn't belong to a child. And then, for the first time, Riku heard another whisper. Not from the boy, not from anyone else. It came from inside his own head. "You saved one. But how many did you ignore?" The words struck him like a blade of memory. He stumbled back, clutching his temples, as if the voice was clawing its way out from the inside. That night, Riku tore the notebook to pieces. But no matter how many pages he destroyed, the number 27 kept echoing in his mind. Not as guilt anymore, but as a countdown. Because somewhere deep inside, a part of him already knew. The whispers weren't warning him about other people. They were leading him to the truth about himself. After that night, Riku stopped sleeping. Because every time he closed his eyes, he could still hear the whispers. Not from others, but from himself. They weren't just thoughts anymore. They were memories, breaking through the cracks he'd built to keep his mind intact. He began retracing the deaths, the 27 names, the streets, the headlines, the faces that never left the news. Every place he visited felt strangely familiar, like he had stood there before, not as a witness, but as the one holding the knife. He tried to convince himself it wasn't true, that he was only imagining patterns that weren't there, but deep down, he knew the truth had always been waiting for him. The whispers were never warnings. They were replays, echoes of what he had already done, fragments of murder that his mind refused to remember. The voices of killers weren't other people. They were the pieces of him that still remembered how it felt to take a life. And with every step he took, the line between guilt and memory began to blur until there was nothing left to separate them. One by one, the faces of his supposed killers dissolved into reflections of himself. Eyes cold, expression empty, yet somehow familiar. Riku realized that he had been chasing ghosts of his own creation, punishing himself with the illusion of empathy, when in truth he had never been the listener. He had always been the source. That night, Riku returned home, a small apartment drenched in the hum of flickering neon lights outside. The whispers were louder than ever now, overlapping, laughing, pleading, accusing, all in his own voice. He looked around and saw the remnants of a life he could no longer recognize. A blood-stained jacket, a knife in the sink, a photograph torn in half. On the wall above his bed, 27 marks were scratched into the plaster, each one carved by a hand that trembled with guilt, yet couldn't stop. Riku stood before the mirror, desperate, broken, shaking. He stared into his reflection, whispering, "It wasn't me. I didn't want this." But the reflection smiled, that same hollow, knowing smile he'd seen in every killer's face. And then it spoke. "Don't fight it, Riku." The voice was soft, calm, almost kind. You were never hearing their thoughts. You were hearing your own. The light flickered once, and when it came back on, there was no one left in the reflection. Only an empty room, and the faint echo of a whisper fading into silence. "We've always been the same voice." Then, darkness, the sound of rain, and the faintest trace of a smile lingering on the cracked surface of the mirror.